I like to call my guests up. I'm gonna have two wonderful guests up here on the panel with me today, and I'd like to introduce both of them. I'm gonna start ladies first. And good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? All right. I feel great this morning. You? Wonderful. Yes. Well, Dr. Carol Swain is a native of Belfort, Virginia, and she's the second of 12 children. Dr. Swain is a person who has risen up through the ranks all the way from GED to PhD. She's a retired professor of political science and law from Vanderbilt University. She earned tenure at Princeton University in political science and public policy. Dr. Swain is a well-accomplished author and editor for over 10 books, including her latest book, and you have to pick it up. I read it. It's wonderful. It's The Black Eye for America, How Critical Race Theory is Burning Down the House. Dr. Swain received her AA degree from Virginia Western Community College, bachelor's degree from Roanoke College, master's degree from Virginia Tech, PhD from North Carolina, Chapel Hill, her MSL from Yale University. Dr. Swain is a prolific scholar, a distinguished author, and a senior fellow of Texas Public Policy Foundation. Give it up for Dr. Swain. Now, the next panelist I'd like to introduce to you, he and I go way back. I'm glad he was 19 and I was 18 years old when we first met. This is only our second time sharing the center stage in over 42 years in championship basketball back then. Consulate Lynden Rose, he's a Consulate General to the Bahamas. He was born in Nassau, Bahamas. Consulate Rose received his AA degree from North Harris County Community College, bachelor's degree from University of Houston. Well, let me pause for a minute because I need to thank Lynden for graduating 1 year ahead of me so I could win the conference back in 1980. Thank you, brother. My coach said he was the only thing standing in my way of winning the conference. So thank you for graduating. And his JD degree in law from University of Houston. Consulate Rose has also served on the Board of Regents at University of Houston. His wife currently serves on the Board of Regents at Texas Southern University. Consulate Rose is a practicing attorney and partner in the law firm of Stanley Frank Rose, LLP in Houston, and founder of the LM Rose Consultant Group. He sits on numerous civic boards as well as corporate boards. Thank you for coming in. We're going to have just a brief conversation about education and about faith. And I would like to begin by giving you the positive and giving you the hope, because this is what gave me hope. One day 10 years ago, I don't know if you've ever heard of Erik Erikson, the theorist, the psychosocial stages of development. Erikson studied his own children. And part of my past life, I was a psychotherapist, so I studied a lot of my master's in clinical psychology, so I studied a lot of clinical psychology. And so I studied my own kids. You know, Erikson studied his kids, let me study my kids. And so one day, Dr. Swain, I was sitting in my backyard 10 years ago, in my most oppressed state. I was sitting in my backyard by my swimming pool, and I talked to my son. I saw my son over there. He was about 15 then. He's 25 now. And I thought about it. I said, I was born in 1961, so I was born in the segregation era. So basically, I was born in Fifth Ward in an all-black hospital, in an all-black community, went to an all-black church, all black school. Everybody that touched my life were African Americans because that was segregation during that time. But here it is, my son, Richard. He's Richard the Fourth. So I'm looking at Richard, and all of his friends are multicultural. Everybody's multicultural. And so Richard is he's a computer. He does coding for games. He's a computer guy. He's a tech guy. So I'm sitting out by the pool, and I'm looking at him, and he's doing his gadgets, right? And I say, hey, Rick, man, I got a question to ask you. I said, I grew up in a community which everybody I knew was of one race. And I said, you growing up, man, I see your friends, everybody, man, multicultural. I say, you know, what's the difference? So Rich is doing his thing, and then he stops, and I see his wheels turning. And then he looks at me, he says, Dad, I don't have a point of reference. And I look up at the sky and I say, Martin, you did it, man, we did it. Civil Rights Act of 1964 is one generation. If you would have asked me that question when I was 15, I would have had a whole lot to tell you. But just one generation away, he had no point of reference. Dr. Swain, you've written extensively on critical race theory, and you grew up in the rural South, abject poverty. You were able to rise up, and this is a question for both of y'all, but first, Dr. Swain. How did your faith play a role in adjusting to your current life situations and then your rise to prominence?
Well, you may not be ready for my answer. Okay, I was born in 1954. That was the year of the Brown versus Board school desegregation case. I was born in Virginia, so it took another more than 10 years for Virginia to integrate its schools. But my family was largely unchurched. And so, but despite that, the influences I had, I was not around people that told me that because of the color of my skin that I was disadvantaged, or because we were poor that I couldn't do something. And so I always believed in America, the American dream, hard work, and I think that that was a major factor in my success. And I remember the civil rights movement not because I participated in it out in the country. In fact, I always hoped we'd have a riot. There's nothing to do out there. But I saw equal opportunities open up for people like me. So 1964, when you were a wee one, that's when the Civil Rights Act was passed that ended all forms of discrimination on the basis of race, national origin, color, religion, sex. That was passed in 1965. You had the Voting Rights Act passed, major game changer for the South. And then 1968, the Open Housing Act that prohibited discrimination when it came to renting and selling homes. It opened up many opportunities for blacks. And so I was a direct beneficiary once I got into the educational system of opportunities. And so, I mean, I think we made great progress in America, and that progress led to the election of Barack Obama, who was supported by many people who wanted America to have a black president. And so they were willing to relax their standards to elect a black person because they thought it was going to be good for America, good for the world. They were wrong.
Consulate Rose, I've read your bio, I've looked at your clips, and you speak very pointedly about the board meetings that you had in your family every day. You were also one of 12 children, yeah. and both of you guys are one of 12 children. I mean, those are big families. You know, growing up, you just talked about the board meetings that you had every day at your kitchen table.
Well, first and foremost, it's my honor to be here. Richard didn't tell you, I was fortunate in life to have played with one of the greatest college basketball team ever, Phi Slamma Jamma at the University of Houston. I played with two gentlemen, Clyde Drexler and Akeem Olajuwon. And people said, hey, Lynden, you're the smart one. You played with those guys, but you're an attorney. Well, let me ask you, I passed them the ball, both of them are now retired, and I'm still working.
Should have kept the ball, man.
That's right. But again, yes, Richard, my foundation is truly based on faith. I grew up in the Bahamas, and for you who have not been there, before you go to heaven, you must visit the Bahamas. And it's beautiful because of the people. But from a family of 12 individuals, Dr. Swain's story is totally different. My family was educated. Yes, my father had a 6th grade education, but he was a true leader. We had morning devotion every day of my life. And when Richard talked about morning devotion, yes, my father was the chairman of the board. You know, we were disciplined, you got your chores, you got your assignment, and you had to do, every day, you had to learn the Psalms, you had to speak, public speaking. You didn't have a choice. My brothers would play, we had a piano, we had an organ. My brothers were 12 years old, they would play. We would have praise and service every day of my life. So you couldn't be afraid to speak because you had to memorize the Psalms. I can still remember Psalms 24, Lynden. Yes, sir, Dad. The earth is the Lord, and the fullness thereof the world, and they that dwell therein, for he had founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. Who should ascend in the hills of the Lord, or who should stand in his holy place? He that has clean hands and pure heart has not lifted up his soul into vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. He should receive the blessing from the Lord of his God and from the God of his salvation. Lift up your head, O ye gate, be lift your everlasting God. The King of glory should come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts. I was 6 years old. And he would say to us, charity begins at home. And that has stayed with me today. So Richard, I would tell you this, and we always talk about it. Lynden, you're an attorney, yes, and most of the times you would be the first in your family. Nope, I'm the 4th in my family. Lynden, you have doctors, yep, yeah, I have doctors in my family. Lynden, what else? I think with 12 kids, my father told us what we were going to be. You argue, you're going to be a lawyer. You like to fix stuff, you're going to be an engineer. But the reason I'm telling you this, how important having a father as the leader of a home. And yes, Richard, I've instilled that in my kids as well, and I am blessed, and I would be remiss. My daughter, Madeline, graduated from Bauer Business School. She's very successful with a major bank. My eldest son, Lynden Jr., LJ, followed my footsteps. He played basketball professionally, and now he's with the Rockets, Houston Rockets. And my youngest son, Leonard, who's probably the smartest in the family, he's a 2-sport athlete at Columbia. He graduated. He turned down Harvard because they didn't allow him to play 2-sport. He wanted to play 2-sport. And the reason being, all of my family members were all athletes, Olympian. You would say, well, Lynden, you were drafted by the Lakers. That must be great to be the first. No, my brother was also drafted by the NBA. But one thing I can claim today, I am the first one to speak at Texas Public Policy Foundation.
Dr. Swain.
I'd like to take another stab at that faith part of the question.
Yes, ma'am.
And I can tell you that even though my immediate family was unchurched, my grandmother, her father was a pastor, was a Methodist pastor. And then I learned later in life, I mean, like in the last 10 years, that on her side of the family, there were free blacks, and some of them were missionaries to Barbados. And I can also tell you that as a child, my mother would say that I did not, that I was different from all of her other children. I can remember that I was always very, very serious. I felt a sense of urgency that now I would describe as the call. I always felt like there was something I was supposed to do. And I had experiences in my late teens, early 20s, where strangers came up to me and said, you know, you're going to be famous someday. And that was during a time when I was suffering from depression. And I was always a deep thinker. I was always a serious seeker of truth. And my seeking truth, you know, took me many places. So I can say that I've been exposed to New Age religions, Eastern religions, and it came full circle with my having a Christian conversion experience in my 40s, after I'd been tenured at Princeton, between the time I was leaving Princeton and going to Vanderbilt. And what happened, God sort of took me backwards and showed me where he was all those places in my life. And I can tell you that I knew nothing about being a university professor. No one in my family knew anything about being a university professor. When I got tenured at Princeton, and I want to tell them something that happened, I told them that I got a promotion because they wouldn't understand tenure. And this thing, it's just so clear that God put people in my life. Not all of them were believers, and they steered me in a particular direction. And when it comes to race, you know, most of my mentors were white. Many of them were older white men, and no one ever treated me like that I couldn't do because of the color of my skin. They encouraged me. And part of my experiences with the black community was that because I came from such poverty, there was not any interest in people like me. And then I'm dark-skinned. And I'm telling you that within our own community, there's a problem with the color of your skin, and it still kind of lingers that you're not necessarily treated the same, but the focus is on the children of the elite. And so my experience is that about America, I believe that clearly where you're born doesn't determine your outcome, that your attitude and what you believe about the world. I also believe that there's a God that foreknows us, and before we are born, that he steers us, he opens doors, he has a plan for our lives. And I believe that, you know, like what is happening for me now, I have this huge platform. I was shy up until I was in my 40s, and I turned down a chance to be on Good Morning America with my first book, totally afraid. But when I got saved, the Lord impressed on my mind that he had given me a message bigger than me, and I should focus on the message, just pleasing him. And I started talking, and I never shut up.
Well, Dr. Swain, we need you to talk, and that's a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
You know, hey, shout it from the hilltops.
Thank you.
You know, Consulate Rose, you grew up in Bahamas, and the Bahamas is 85% African American,
Yes.
12% European, and 3% Asian and Latino American. You know, how does this idea that one race is, because of the color of their skin, an oppressor, and the other race, because of the color of their skin, automatically are the oppressed? How does that work in the Bahamas growing up where there's 85% African American? Would that fly?
Well, good morning, America. In a country like the Bahamas, 85% black, I'd never heard the word discrimination in my life until I came to America. Because we respect each other, we were looking for leadership, and we were looking for godly men and women to lead. It wasn't about race, because we're all one race. We are the human race. And Richard, I would say this when you talk about race and I would quote it. Dr. King said, it's very obscure, but yes, profound, that men normally hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they don't communicate, and they don't communicate because they're separated. We were all one. We had to get to know each other. We all had the same common goal. We wanted to live right and do what's right. And so I can say to America, to friends and family everywhere, that look, there's only one race, that's the human race.
Amen.
Dr. Swain, your accomplishments, I mean, you dropped out of high school. Got married at 16.
Yes.
Got married at 16. As you mentioned, went through a few bouts of depression and have risen from, and decided to get your GED, and then from going back in your GED, you took every step in the ladder. Community college, AA, BA, MA, all the way up to PhD, and then received a master's degree in law. What do you say to people? Yeah, yeah. And you're an African-American woman coming up in the rural South. What do you say to people that say just because you're an African-American, you're oppressed, or a theory that says you're oppressed because you're an African-American, cannot achieve, and because another person is of another race, they're oppressors? I think you've blown that theory out of the water.
Well, I can tell you that it really hurts me to see the messages we're sending to our young people, white and black, because I think that today it would be much harder for a younger person, especially if they were a minority, to repeat my success story, because there's so many voices out there telling young people what they can't do. And the problem with critical race theory, it argues that all white people are oppressors, even that white male in Appalachia, parents never finished the second grade, they live in a holler, they're dreaming of the future, that somehow that their white privilege trumps the privileges of someone who comes from an affluent background in the minority community. And they argue that white people, just being born white, that they have a property investment in their skin color. They have to divest themselves of their race, and that only white people can be racist, that all minorities are victims, that racism is permanent. And all of these things, it's poison for our young people. And I think that, that we have to combat those lies. And critical race theory really puts forth a white supremacist argument that white people, the oppressor class, that they control the fates of all people of color, and that we have no agency of our own. It's up to white people to deliver us. And what they've come up with is resegregation. You know, we had a civil rights movement to get rid of resegregation, so they've come up with resegregation. They've come up with math is racist. And so there are no right and wrong answers to math. Depending on your race, you might get a different answer. That means that young people who are taught by teachers pushing that theory, and it was funded by the Gates Foundation, mathematics, how are they going to get the basic skills necessary to learn algebra, calculus, to become all the things that you have to have a math background, and even with art, you have to have some mathematical skills to be able to scale a picture. There are things that it's not just taking a brush and painting or something like that. It's not that simple. They're destroying the future of generations of minorities right now in the name of helping them. And it's, it's horrible.
And let me just say, you know, I had an opportunity to read your book, in the chapter on critical race theory versus the Constitution and the Civil Rights Movement.
Right.
And you are spot dead on. Critical race theory is the polar opposite of the civil rights movement.
It
and
is.
the Civil Rights Bill 1964, Title VI, which bans discrimination based on race. And race, sex, creed, or color, or religion. Thank you so much for that book. Consulate Rose, I want to push this back to you.
Okay.
You know, we had the Vocational Education Act of 1963, and schools across America were given the charge to teach the trades in high school and then create co-ops for students who wanted to not necessarily graduate and go to college, but graduate and go into industry. And at that time, we had the lowest dropout rate in American history. When I graduated in '79, I'm gonna tell myself, you know, we had about a dropout rate of less than 1%. But we took the trades out of high schools and we moved them up to the community colleges. And we took the co-ops out. And we saw an increase, a stark increase in dropouts, dropping out of high school, dropping out of education, and dropping into criminal justice. We created the criminal justice industrial complex. What do you think of, your dad was the chairman of the board.
Yeah.
The chairman was sitting
The
there
Rose
every
family.
morning and he was saying, wait a minute, you have an interest in dealing with your hands, you're gonna go be an engineer. You know, I mean, what is with this thought that every student has to go to college or they're a failure and moving away from industry? Should we move back in that direction?
Dr. Johnson, that is very, very enlightened question. But let me step back a second to show, we're talking about reference. From the Bahamas, I'm proud to say that Sidney Poitier, who's just recently passed, he and my father were childhood friends. I know the family, and if you followed him, he left the Bahamas. His family were tomato farmers, and they would go to Florida and work. He went to New York as a teenager. And Sidney Poitier was working at a restaurant as a dishwasher, hotel restaurant as a dishwasher, and a Jewish man was sitting there, and he saw Sidney Poitier with the newspaper, and he said, son, what's in the paper today? And Sidney Poitier could not answer. So he thought maybe he did not want to tell him. So he followed back up and asked him the next time he saw him. He was a regular customer. What's in the newspaper? And he realized that Sidney Poitier could not read. This man, Jewish man, white man, openly embraced him and taught him how to read. And ladies and gentlemen, guess who's coming to dinner?
Amen.
One of the greatest human beings that we've ever walked this earth, because he was open and not afraid to learn. He didn't have to go to college, to your question. He took his gift, which God had given him as an actor, to impact lives. And so I agree with you. There are areas that we should look at those kids and know where their talent lies and said, hey, this is probably best for you. Look, I was fortunate because I was able to get a quality education, and my children all got a quality education. But there are individuals that are better suited, but they need mentors, they need internship, they need guidance so that they can help them, filter them, because again, if there's no leader, there's no chairman of the board at home, there's no one there to guide these young men and individuals. So that's Richard, Dr. Johnson, we're gonna have to really look at that area. And I agree with you, not everyone. And I had the pleasure of serving on the University of Houston Board of Regents. Governor Perry appointed me, and again, going back to the first, And then my wife was appointed to Texas Southern Board of Regents, and I thought it was a big thing. Then she got reappointed to the Board of Regents, and then I said, well, man, maybe I need to go back. And she said, no. So she got reappointed for the third time to the Board of Regents. So I will never catch her up. So, so we really care about education. So Richard, you're right on. We really, that's near and dear to my heart to make certain that all of our kids are educated. But those who don't have the opportunity to go to college, not everyone goes to college, get that opportunity. They should be in a position that they can go and have an opportunity to be successful and raise their families.
Dr. Swain, let me say this real quick, and I'm going to ring in. It sounds like we need some critical math theory, critical reading theory, critical writing theory. We need critical education theory as opposed to all this other stuff. Go ahead.
We do need to go back to basics and get all that social justice garbage out of our classrooms. It never should have escaped from the humanities departments and the social science departments at universities. And as far as this whole idea that's been pushed by the left that everyone belongs in college, and what it has happened is I think it has destroyed opportunities for millions of young people, especially black people, because with affirmative action, when it became more than a small thumb on the scale, it put people into environments where they were sure to fail. And I think a lot of the unrest and anger and bitterness on college campuses among minority students, that it comes from the fact that you have people there and they're frustrated because they really can't do the work. And they get, steered off into those ethnic studies programs. And we joked, what were you going to do with those degrees? And they become your diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. So they're telling you how to run your corporations. Those are the ones that get through, but many students fail because they don't belong in college. They could have been successful if they had been steered towards a community college or an occupation. And so we are harming the people we're trying to help. Thank you.
And I know our time is running out. This has been a wonderful discussion. Martin Luther King said it best. He said, one cannot begin to live until he can rise above the narrow confinements of his own individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. It's time now for us to rise up to the broader concerns of all humanity. Thank you for letting us know that there is only one race of people, and that is the human race. And God has placed in our hearts and in our spirits the love for human beings. And it doesn't matter what race, creed, color, or religion. We're all one race of people. We're all a part of this beautiful multicolored coat
Amen.
that God has given to the world. Now let's go out and subdue it. I'll give you guys, I think we got 20 seconds each.
Okay. Go ahead first.
20 seconds, you're on the clock.
I just want to thank TPPF for giving me an affiliation so I don't have to call myself former Vanderbilt Princeton professor.
And my charge to you today, when you have a name as of Rose, look, I smile all the time because I was born in a bed of roses, and everywhere I go, I smell like a rose. And today, I'm going to challenge all men in here to give the special person in your life a rose. If you don't remember anything else, remember to share a rose as a symbol of love. So that's my goal, and that's my charge today. So, gentlemen, even if it's on your text or whatever, send roses today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And God bless TPPF, God bless Texas, God bless America.